Well, hello there, the 90s. 1990 was the last year of active service, both for BBC One's stateliest Globe and BBC Two's pastel-shaded summation of the yuppie era, before both were demobbed early in 1991. So let's have a look at both their final Christmases. BBC One gave us another of my personal favourites, the Globe with a face on the front of a pop-up book, with magical dust and stuff. The trailers ruled as well, with some fantastic Christmassy music.
Christmas Eve on BBC One. Happy Christmas from BBC One.
Lovely stuff. Gaze upon this glittery confection and consider that it's dangerously close to being 20 years old. BBC Two's offering was more spare and also less baffling than previous years, although not by a full lot. No idea what it's meant to be or what the connection is to Christmas, if any, but at least it can be described and looks fun and friendly, well, relatively speaking. Its major problem is the music, which consists entirely of those two notes, the last of which is held until the announcer finally gets round to announcing the programme coming up, by which time it often sounded like a siren heralding the apocalypse. In 1991, everything changed. Say hello to the new school. For the first time, BBC One and BBC Two looked like each other, as the corporation went all, well, corporate. This new homogeny did make for some very nice idents, but it had the unfortunate effect of spelling the end of the days when Christmas idents could bear no resemblance whatsoever to the usual incumbent. Which isn't to imply that Christmas idents became rubbish. Far from it. In fact, that didn't happen until the shake-up after the next one in 2001, which I'm not even touching on in this series. First time at bat, Namby Ned's Swirly Whirly World became the Swirly Whirly Moon, which was cleverly superimposed with the bat signal when it introduced guess what. Someone at the corporation was clearly lunar obsessed that year, because over on the other side we had this construction based for some reason on the classic 1902 film A Trip to the Moon. 8-year-old me thought it was great but faintly creepy. I think he might have been right. 1992 gave us another nice one, this dazzling little number with its squadron of toys reminiscent of the one from 3 years earlier. This ident was actually considered too jolly to carry off the national anthem at close down. This one wasn't. Oh well. Anyway, BBC Two's offering for the old Annus Horribilis wasn't their best effort ever. It was quite old-fashioned and even a little perfunctory, although it was at least vaguely normal for the first time in years. Don't worry, that wasn't going to last. In a way, this feels like something of a transitionary ident between the avant-garde and trying far too hard to be Channel 4 BBC Two of the latter half of the 80s, to the still fairly avant-garde but with a far greater sense of its own identity BBC Two of the 90s. What on earth am I talking about? I don't know. Just stare at the pretty colours. 1993 was an especially good year. BBC One's offering was luscious in every way, including the frankly ludicrous string music. And the nighttime version was even more gorgeous. But it were both surpassed by BBC Two's fantastic animated mini-epic, which I'm going to show you in full. A very Fitzcarraldo Christmas as performed by the Borrowers. Absolutely fantastic and worthy of anyone's nostalgia. There was no topping any of that, and there's no point trying. 1994 gave us this sort of protozoic Google Doodle. This is Christmas Eve. Here's Christmas Day. Ooh, what a surprise. And this is every other day until they got bored and went back to normal sometime around the 29th of December. And BBC Two just ploughs its own slightly creepy furrow as per usual. Into 1995 now, and looking back, everyone that particular year seemed to be an unpardonable cretin. Except whoever created this lovely little ident. Alright, so put the logo on top of a tree isn't exactly the most original concept in the world, but it's all in the execution. (1995's BBC Two offerings starred these two comic characters who it should be illegal not to love. Into 1996, and okay, so putting the logo inside a gift box isn't the most original idea in the world, but it's all in the execution. This was actually the last year we'd see the old slitted one, which sounds disturbingly like a sex aid. And I think it went out on a relative high, although the restrictions in the format are starting to show. Meanwhile, after flirting with cuteness and comedy, BBC Two went back to being avant-garde. Well, to be honest, it could probably pass for a BBC One ident if it wasn't for the music. And the big two. In 1997, everything changed again as the balloon arrived on BBC One, although it didn't actually make an appearance in any Christmas idents for another 2 years. Instead, in 1997, they went with a set of slightly abstract representations of items from the 12 Days of Christmas, which never really worked for me at the time. Maybe they were just too over-stylised. I mean, how is that a partridge in a pear tree? Or maybe it's because they were predominantly orange, which isn't a very Christmassy sort of a colour. Or maybe it's just because they seemed more like an ad man's concept than an actual celebration of the time of year. Whatever, a lot of people liked it, but it never clicked for me. Over on BBC Two, shooting stars was at the height of its popularity, so rather than create something of lasting worth, they just had the current faces of the network gurning into a snow globe in an apparent attempt to make the viewer feel insulted and chastened at the very notion of enjoying Christmas. 1998 was a return to form for BBC One, and marked the first use of widescreen in a Christmas ident, As If You Care. Alright, so putting the logo on top of a tree isn't the most original idea in the world, but it's all in the execution, and by execution I mean Shrieking Fairy. The balloon finally put in a Christmassy appearance in 1999 alongside this gigantic projection of Father Christmas, which was very, very lovely indeed. And over on BBC Two, alright, so putting the logo on top of the tree isn't the most... oh, forget it. I wouldn't mind, but they recycled the fairy bit as well. Finally, at least as far as we're concerned, 2000, which brought this absolute joy from BBC One, although you have to wonder why they didn't think of it sooner. BBC Two's one for that year was great as well, and quite creative in showing the two at such a funny angle. In fact, this was so good that they actually brought it back 2 years later for the Winter Olympics. And what a long, strange trip it's been from 1976 to 2000. This is Frank Coleman wishing you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year and all of that business.